Greetings from CDSS and welcome to our web chat on Singing Together Safely. I'm Linda Henry, our Community Resources Manager, and we'd like to thank each one of you for joining us this evening. It's a very important part of the CDSS mission to connect and support organizers of song, music, and dance communities. And we're very aware that you are the ones who are keeping these traditions alive. So the purpose of this web chat is to support your hard work, especially during the challenging times of the pandemic. So we'll start with some tech tips from Nikki Perez, our CDSS. Oh, she has a new title. What is your title?
I'm now the Gifts and Database Coordinator.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so tech tips. We are recording this web chat, so please turn off your video if you don't want to be recorded. Please do remain muted. There are captions for the video. You can turn them on or off by clicking the closed caption symbol that says live transcript at the bottom of the screen. While we're screen sharing the slides, you can adjust their size by dragging the vertical line between the video and the slides. And the chat function is currently set to be delivered only to CDSS hosts. So if you're having technical difficulties, please send a direct message to Sarah Pilzer, who will help you the best that she can.
Okay, next slide, please. So we'll be hearing from two guests, Janice Hanson and Steve Deering, both of whom are representing groups that have been hosting events online and in person. And while they're speaking, you can enter any questions that you have into the chat. And after we hear from Steve, we'll have a Q&A moderated by Sarah with questions for Janice and Steve. Then we'll hear from Kimbi Hagen from Atlanta, who will be talking with us about her vast experience from the public health perspective. And again, enter any questions you have in the chat for Kimbi, and we'll have a second Q&A with her. At the end, we'll have 5 minutes for me to send you off with resources from CDSS. And we're trying something new this evening. At the end, the official end of the web chat at 8:30, we'll have an optional time for socializing for anybody who wants to stick around for 10 minutes or so afterwards. So before we start, CDSS would like you all to know that we're very aware of the challenges that the organizers of music, dance, and song communities have been experiencing during the pandemic. And we've been receiving many questions about when can groups resume their events. And unfortunately, we are not able to give you a magic formula for when your particular group should start up based on the variety of considerations, including all of the COVID statistics that vary so much from across the country. So what we can do is offer experiences and perspectives from other organizers and resource people that we know of, so that you can hear from them about ways they have been keeping their groups safely connected during the pandemic. So we've chosen guests for tonight's web chat who can do just that. So let's move right along to our first guest, Janice Hanson. Here's a bit of information about Janice from Rochester, New York. Her group's been around for a long time. They have weekly sing-arounds that you'll hear from her about. And also very recently, she has news from her group about ways her board has been deliberating about how they will handle their events this summer, whether to resume in person or continue with their online singing events. So Janice, over to you.
Hey, well, thank you for inviting me. I have to start off by saying I'm not an expert on singing safely together, at least the safely part of it. That's not something that I ever thought I would need to know about, aerosols and all the other things that we've all been getting very familiar with during this. We've been finding certainly that we have to keep being flexible, changing strategies as needed, but doing the best we can. But I will say that, you know, I'll just be able to tell you about what our experience has been here in Rochester, New York. And I've been singing with the folks at Golden Link for nearly 20 years. Golden Link was founded in 1971. And for the better part of those 50 years, that's included a Tuesday night weekly sing around. We have a song circle, two circles of chairs. Everybody is invited to either sing a song, request a song, or just listen. And the requests are always fun because you never know who's going to be asking for a particular song. And certainly lots of interaction before and after. And I think the gathering together part is the part that really has kept the community so strong for 50 years. We usually get about 30 to 40 people at our weekly. I'm talking pre-pandemic time, but we would get about 30 to 40 people in the circle. And we invite people to add harmonies, bring instruments, and add instrumental accompaniment, as long as they don't drown out the person leading the songs. So it's a very interactive time. When the pandemic started in March 2020, we missed 1 week, and then we had one of our members say, well, I've got a Zoom account. Would you guys like to try singing on Zoom? And obviously we all very quickly learned that you can't sing together because of the lag time. But we worked out a system to be able to let everybody have a chance, like we do. And when we're in person, everybody gets a number, and we just basically go around by number. We have a person that's hosting it, so welcoming people, talking to people. The chat and during the sing arounds is certainly very active as well. We felt like we had to keep doing something, certainly, to keep the music going in our community. In June 2021, we decided that we explored some possibilities, and we ended up adding outdoor sing-arounds on Sunday afternoons. Because it was outdoors, we couldn't really do it in the evening because it would get dark. And the church where we held our sing-arounds wasn't letting us in the building, except we got permission to use the bathrooms. So we set it up outside, weather dependent, encouraged people to bring their own chairs. As people showed up, we would get their contact tracing information. And then, and I think we might have started with, no, I don't think we even, by that point in June, we weren't requiring people to wear masks. Unless they were not vaccinated. We weren't checking vaccination, but we were asking people if they weren't vaccinated to wear masks. And we had about 20 to 25 people coming for these in-person sing-arounds. The pictures that you saw there were from, I think, one of our first weeks of sing-arounds. I jumped up and snapped some pictures of people singing along together, and it certainly was wonderful to be able to do that. And we did keep going with the outdoor singing sessions until the weather got cold, and then we had to kind of limit that. And we did also have one instance in October of last year where we had one person we found out afterwards had tested positive for COVID, but because we had contact information for everybody, we sent an email, gave people, information on how to go get tested, and we didn't have any positive results after that. So I think, that for me, that was a pretty good success of being able to meet together, when there were weather permitted, and sing. We did also have our Turtle Hill Folk Festival, which we do in September every year, and we held that in person, and we had some singing sessions there and some workshops on singing. Some of that space was outdoor pavilion, so open air on the sides, which made it a lot more open to the keeping free flow of air. So I think that also made people feel more comfortable with being able to sing together there. And we were asking people to wear masks when they were indoors, but if they were in an open space, they didn't need to wear masks. So we're still trying to figure out, it's a continual discussion of what are we going to do now. I will say that we've said from the beginning that we were going to follow the CDC and the state and county guidelines, and certainly we have to respect whatever is being asked of us by the venue we're using at the time. And for our ticketed events, we actually were requiring vaccination and masking up until recently. So But at last night's board meeting, we continued our discussion, and we've had some other things we've been trying to figure out, but we are talking that now we think we're going to go back to doing Sunday afternoon outdoor sing-arounds starting in June. We've certainly have said that the Zoom sessions are equally important, so we'll keep doing those on Tuesday nights. So we'll keep doing both things. I think that was the bulk of what I had to say about the in-person. So that's what we've come up with so far, is being able to sing outdoors in an open setting. We do have use of the building. We've learned that the church that we were, not the same room that we were in before, a larger room, which doesn't have as good acoustics, but we have the possibility of using that. We're hoping to explore the possibility of having singing outdoors if the weather's good, and being able to move inside if it's not. And the church will allow us to have up to 65 people with masks optional in this large fellowship room. So we'll see. We're looking into that possibility. And then the Zoom sing-arounds was the other part that you wanted me to speak about. We started Zoom sing-arounds on March 24th. We only missed 1 week when the pandemic started. In February of 2020, we marked 100 Zoom sing-arounds that we had done. We actually had a special theme night and encouraged people to sing songs that had the number 100 in it. I told them they got bonus points, but I didn't know what exactly bonus they got. But anyway, it was an incentive to try to come up with songs that had the number 100. Which that was a lot of fun, despite the fact that it was marking that we had done 100 Zoom sessions. But the format on Zoom, we try to duplicates in some ways what we do in person. Everybody gets a chance to sing. Obviously, you can only sing one person at a time, but people will often exchange messages in the chat during the sing around. A lot of the communication, I think, actually happens in the chat. And the little bits in between, we let people clap in between songs, stay muted when you're not singing, but at the end, everybody claps for the person who's just gone. Trying to keep it very equitable and giving everybody a chance to sing. When we first started moving onto Zoom, our webmaster actually put together several pages of technical information that's up on, and still up on our website in our sing around section, explaining to people how the best to set up their computer for doing Zoom, how to set up your microphone, camera, lighting, all of that. We all very quickly became tech experts and getting a good look on our computer screens. We did find that one advantage of Zoom, and some of you may have already noticed this too, people can attend from all over the world, and there's not any commute time because you're just walking into your room where you have your computer set up. We've met a lot of new friends from all over the place. We had 2 out-of-state Zoom singers who enjoyed our session so much that they came to our festival in September and they joined Golden Lake. So that's been really, really great. We regularly have participants from Kentucky, Philadelphia, California, Vancouver, England. These are people who are coming every week. And we've even had some from Hawaii, Australia, and Japan. So we've made a lot of new friends that way. And we're planning to continue doing the Zoom sessions in some form. We don't know yet if it'll be every single week, but what we're thinking we will do is if we go back to having in-person sessions on Tuesday nights, then the Sunday afternoons will be when we have our Zoom sessions and be able to keep growing that community of musicians. On Zoom, we have about 25 people each week. We also, 4 times a year when we were in person, we would do a member showcase concert where we would actually set up a stage area and microphones and really give people a chance to do a 20-minute, 25, 30-minute showcase. And we've actually incorporated those into our Zoom sessions 4 times a year, where we'll have 2 featured spots at the beginning and then move into the regular sing around. So I think that covers kind of the 2 different sides of what we do.
Great, Janice, so helpful. I want everybody to notice on Janice's slide that the link to her website is there. And Janice, did you say that there's information about your Zoom, your technology?
Look for the sing around page. There is a page about like the tech tips on how to set it up. And he actually did separate things for if you're on a portable device versus on a laptop or computer. And he's been trying to keep it updated, although of course Zoom keeps changing, but he's been trying to keep it updated. So if people want some additional tips that they can provide to somebody who might be new to this, certainly check it out.
Was it challenging for your board to be making the decision for the summer?
It was challenging, and we've just had all kinds of all kinds of challenges on many fronts, partly but also because we do a concert series, and we've ended up moving our venue for our concert series, and then it's, well, okay, do we move the sing-arounds to that location? We've had a bunch, and we have storage on site that we normally, our archives and other things are in that location. So do we look at moving to another? We've been looking at different venues too. So it's been ongoing trying to figure out, and it hasn't, I don't think it's quite settled yet. But I'm hoping at some point we will at least come up with a plan for the near future to move back to having our Tuesday night in-person gatherings. That's what we're hoping.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I want to remind everybody to be putting your questions into the chat as we welcome our next guest, Steve, all the way out in Vancouver. So here's a glimpse of his group, the Vancouver Folk Song Society. And he'll be telling you a little bit about what this picture was taken, the event that was taken. And I think one thing that his group is grappling with right now is what they'll be doing in relation to their annual week-long retreat. So Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Linda, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this. Listening to Janice, we're a very similar organization. All the same issues arise, all the same Zoom issues arise, and so on. We don't meet quite as frequently. So the Vancouver Folk Song Society has been meeting twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of each month since 1959. And we also host an annual week-long retreat in late September that attracts attendees from beyond the greater Vancouver area. So we get people from the rest of the province of BC and from Washington and Oregon typically come up for that. Since the pandemic shut down our in-person gatherings at the end of March 2020, like everybody else, we've been meeting and singing together over Zoom instead. But in the last few months, we have started up our in-person gatherings again. And we're currently alternating between one in-person and one Zoom meeting each month. So the first Wednesday is in person and the third is on Zoom. So let me talk first about the resumed in-person gatherings. We started planning for that in late November of last year, hoping for a January start. But then the Omicron wave came along and knocked that plan back. And so we didn't actually get started till the beginning of March. In that late November period, our provincial health authorities were allowing indoor choral gatherings. So choir practices and concerts and stuff were allowed to take place with a number of restrictions. In particular, attendance had to be limited to no more than 50% of the capacity of the venue. Proof of vaccination was required to be presented at the door. Masks were required to be worn by everybody all the time, except a performer or a speaker could be unmasked if standing at least 6 feet away from everybody else. You had to provide hand sanitizer, and then there were more rules if you serve food and drink. Now, so those were the provincial orders allowed us to conduct our regular meeting. What we didn't know was how comfortable our members would be gathering in person, given the very hazardous nature of our activity, which is singing at each other, the discomfort of singing in masks. So we learned that we could have a lead singer could be unmasked, but everybody joining in on the choruses would have to stay masked. And the demographics of our membership. So we're mostly old folks, as you can see by that picture there. We're mostly gray hairs. So of course, much more vulnerable to COVID. And none of our organizers, none of our board members are epidemiologists. So we basically decided, well, let's just hold a test event and we'll comply with all the orders and see how many people show up and then listen to their feedback afterwards. So that was the approach. However, we decided to add some additional measures as well. So that 50% capacity limit in our case, in the place where we normally meet, is about 25 people. So we're limiting it to 25. We decided not to have our traditional tea and cookie break in the middle of the evening so that we didn't have to comply with the various additional rules for handling food and drink. We normally organize our chairs in a circle, and just like Janice was saying, we go around one at a time, offering a chance to lead a song. But in the case of our recent in-person meetings, where we're orienting the chairs sort of theater style, sort of facing one end of the room, and then at that end of the room, we've laid down a line of tape on the floor, which is separated by 9 feet from the first row of chairs, and saying, okay, if you stand behind that line and you want to lead a song, you could take your mask off. Otherwise, you keep your mask on. And we also decided to, instead of our normal tea and coffee break, we would still take a break in the middle of the evening, but we would open all the doors to ventilate the room out. And so we do that for 15 minutes. And we set up a couple of those portable air cleaner things, the HEPA filter devices. So that's our sort of set of safety measures. So we've only now held two meetings, one in March and one in April, and we're holding another one tomorrow night, employing all of those safety measures, even though the provincial public health orders have been gradually phased out over these last few months. So for example, the 50% limit was relaxed before our first meeting. The requirement for masking was relaxed before our second meeting. And the last thing, the vaccine passports have been in effect, but they've just been canceled. So tomorrow nights, we don't have to comply with that. But we are continuing to use all the same measures, sort of maximally defending ourselves. Because, the province said we're relaxing these as mandates, but organizations are free and welcome to impose them themselves. So we set a limit of 25. 24 people attended our March meeting, 22 in April, and we have 20 people registered for tomorrow night. We actually require pre-registration by email so that we don't end up having to turn anyone away at the door. I don't know if that 24, 22, 20 represents a declining interest. It's probably too few data points to make a hard conclusion there, but it's interesting. The feedback from the folks who did attend our first two meetings has been universally positive, both for the opportunity to sing and harmonize together again, and for all the precautions taken. So people seem to appreciate that excess of caution, and it makes them comfortable enough to come, the ones who did come. Now, say we're getting 20 to 25 people showing up there. Our Zoom sessions usually get about 40 people. And so we still have a number of people who are not yet comfortable coming. We might even have one or two who refuse to come because we're enforcing masks and they don't want to do that anymore. But at least for the ones who have shown up, they've been comfortable. And as far as we know, nobody's contracted COVID yet at one of our events. Now, because the pandemic situation continues to be uncertain, we are just planning ahead a month at a time. So I said we do a in-person on the first Wednesday and a Zoom meeting on the third Wednesday. Just before the third Wednesday, our board meets and we decide, what are we going to do in the following month? Are we going to go ahead with an in-person meeting? And if so, what pandemic safety measures shall we take? And then we announce that at the Zoom meeting on the third Wednesday and we email it out to our membership list. We are prepared to return to Zoom only on very short notice if the COVID situation deteriorates again. So that's basically, where we're at, and so far so good. Let me say a few words about our Zoom sessions, which might be, I think ours are quite a bit more structured than most similar organizations. So we start our our Zoom sessions at 7:30, and we do for the first 30 minutes, we have what we call our main stage. And so that's everybody in the main Zoom room, and there's sort of individual reservable spots to sing on the main stage. And people apply for one of those slots by email starting the day before. And then you can request to be considered for a slot, and then we have a couple of MCs, and they go through the applicants and decide who's going to sing based on criteria like, who hasn't sung recently, trying to get a good mix of male and female, of very accomplished musicians and more beginners, and basically make sure there's a nice balance. So it's sort of at the MC's discretion as to who gets those slots. And then after that first 30 minutes, we create Zoom breakout rooms, and we randomly allocate 6 to 8 people to each room for a half hour, and they among themselves each do a sing around with just the smaller group. We bring everybody together, and then we randomize again for another 30 minutes. And then finally, we bring everybody back into the main Zoom room, and then we have a feature performance by one of our members. And that's usually, so it's a 30-minute set, a 20 to 30-minute set. And that's usually booked like a month ahead, so they have time to prepare an interesting set. And then finally, after all of that, that sort of brings us to the end of the formal evening. And then there's kind of an after session, which everybody stays in the main Zoom room, and we treat it as a big song circle. And that goes on for maybe until 11 o'clock at night, depending on how many people want to hang around. So lots of opportunities for everyone to sing or to play a tune or to recite a poem, regardless of their level of confidence or competence. As I said, attendance at the Zoom sessions is usually around 40 people, about a quarter of whom live outside the Vancouver area, but almost exclusively in the same time zone. So we have lots of regular attendees from Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and California. But perhaps because where our time zone is, we haven't had a lot of attendees from eastern parts of Canada or the US or Europe, or we have an Australian has popped in a couple times and so on, but it's probably an awkward time for people in other areas to join us. And just one last sort of interesting observation is we don't see any sign of Zoom fatigue yet. So we've started offering the in-person stuff. People are still showing up in the same numbers for the Zoom sessions, and I say lots of them hope we don't stop doing the Zoom sessions because they live farther away or they're not yet comfortable with meeting in person. So let me just, I think I have another couple minutes. Do I?
Yep, you're fine.
Okay, so let me just itemize a number of things that we're still struggling with, or sort of they're currently open issues. So one is, under what circumstances and when shall we start to relax any of our COVID safety measures? As I say, we're now employing measures that aren't required by law, but are appreciated by our members. Probably the first thing we'll drop is the vaccine passports, but that's all still up in the air. Shall we reduce the frequency of Zoom sessions or eliminate them altogether? So this is a difficult decision because, as I say, our Zoom sessions have attracted a number of regular members who live too far away to attend in person. And many of them have actually paid to join our organization, so we owe them something. On the other hand, our couple of in-person meetings have attracted people who we used to regularly see in person and never participated in Zoom, or only came to Zoom once and said, nah, that's not for me. So it's nice having them back again. And then clearly there's still some people who are close enough to attend in person who aren't comfortable yet doing that, so they'll still come to the Zooms. So that raises the issues of, shall we consider some kind of hybrid thing? Shall we stream our in-person meetings over the internet, or shall we actually allow full hybrid where remote participants can be seen and heard at the meeting place and everybody can see and hear everyone else? And the place where we meet have been putting in facilities for that, have put in high-speed internet connections, big screen TVs, and so on for other events going on in the same venue. And so that sort of those technical facilities will become available to us, but we're really wondering whether or not, that introduces people having to sit on a computer, maybe operate a camera, setting up mics, which we don't normally use, and might detract from the sort of unplugged vibe that we really enjoy in our normal in-person meetings. So that's an issue that we're currently grappling with is, how much do we try to accommodate both in the same place, and will that ruin either or both? And like Janice was talking, we're also considering having outdoor sessions in the summer, and we've started planning for our weekend retreat at the end of September, not knowing how many people will be interested in that, because that entails, so that's held in a kind of a rustic retreat center with cabins with 6 to 8 beds in them and so on. And are people going to want to sort of sleep dormitory style with a bunch of other people as soon as late September? And that's the big unknown. We're going to start organizing in the hopes that it might happen, but we're well prepared to say, if the numbers aren't there, we won't go forward with that. Okay, that's enough from me for now, I think.
Thank you, Steve. Sounds like your group has to be amazingly flexible. So,
Afraid so.
well, it sounds like you're doing a great job. Okay, so next slide, please, and I'll introduce you to Sarah, who will be moderating our Q&A. Take it away, Sarah.
Great. We've had a few questions come in the chat. Please do continue to send those directly to me in chat. But the first one is for Steve, though, Janice, if you have thoughts, feel free to chime in as well. Are there particular masks or specific masks that you recommend for singing? What has worked for your participants?
We haven't set any standards requiring masks. We've basically, in our announcements, we've said, we believe, N95 class masks or masks that are designed specifically for singing are recommended, but we don't insist on it, and not everybody uses that. Again, the provincial orders were never concrete about setting any limits there. So that's where we are, is we recommend higher quality masks, but we don't require them.
Are there any that you've found work, like brands even, that work better for singers versus others?
No, as I say, we've only done a couple of these sessions, and a couple of people have showed up with masks that are specifically designed for singers, but we haven't researched it as an organization or done any comparison. Most people are using the N95 ones where the bands just go over your ears, that are most commonly available in the pharmacies around here.
Great. So no particularly comfortable masks out there.
No. So it's unpleasant. It's you get hot and sweaty in them, and it's not fun. So some of the people when leading songs have decided to keep their masks on anyway. For example, that allows them to stand closer to the audience and, with their guitar, and be more intimate with the audience rather than standing at a 9-foot spacing. But for people who do stand behind the line, the audience has now gotten into reminding them, you can take your mask off if you want.
Great. Next question. Either Janice or Steve, are either of your groups doing contact tracing? That is, it sounds like you haven't had a situation where people have said after your sing they tested positive, but if that were to happen, would you then reach out to people who attended the sing and let them know? This person who asks said that they have a friend who is a local choir director who's trying to do that, but found that people don't don't mention when they're sick, or if they do, it's only because they have to miss rehearsal or not come to an event, not as a heads up.
We actually did do contact tracing in the summer when we were doing outdoor singing sessions. We had somebody kind of at the entrance as people were coming from the parking lot there with a clipboard and writing down. Most of them were people we knew, so all you had to do was write down their name, and we knew we had their contact information. And we did have one person test positive afterwards, notified us, and we were able to let the people who were there know.
Great.
And luckily, well, we also had an event coming up that same week. And so most of the people who were going to be volunteering at the event also had been at the sing around. So we told everybody that was going to be helping to volunteer, well, you're going to have to do a test and make sure you test negative before you come volunteer.
Yeah,
But luckily they all did. So
Yeah, thanks.
we haven't, so because we require pre-registration and we're doing checks of vaccine passports, we have an attendance list, and contact email addresses and phone numbers for the people who attend, without sort of collecting that separately for contact tracing purposes. We haven't, but now you ask the question, we haven't done this, maybe we should have. In our announcements is basically ask people, by the way, if you do test positive for COVID afterwards, please let us know. That's a good idea. We haven't done that.
And we did actually, at our ticketed events, we did require the things we did from like October on through March. We were requiring advanced registration only, and everybody who was buying a ticket, we had to get their contact information. So we were doing that, but we started discussing, well, will we need to keep doing that? We're not sure, because it certainly doesn't seem to be something that the government or the county or anybody is requiring.
Great. Have either of your organizations explored the question of liability in the case of participants testing positive? Again, sounds like it hasn't necessarily come up, but have your boards discussed what you would do in that situation, in terms of somebody's trying to hold you responsible for their positivity?
It did actually come up at our board meeting last night, just briefly. Now we actually have a lawyer on our board. So, and he says, well, let me know if anybody's suing us and we'll figure out what we have to do. But I think just trying to be extremely cautious, making it very clear what we're expecting of people when they come to our events, and being consistent. That was actually one thing our lawyer said was, being consistent with our messaging, making sure people knew. I mean, if we've documented what we're saying to people and what we expect them to be doing, I think that helps to some extent.
Yeah, so we also talked about this. So we normally carry insurance for our events, if people fall down the stairs or whatever. But in advance of hosting our first in-person meeting a couple months ago, we added director's insurance for our board members, which we probably should have had done long ago anyways, but this made us think more about it because of the potential risk that might arise from. And the other thing was that we were very conscious about saying, here are the provincial regulations. We, included a link to them in all of our announcements that we are conforming to all of these, and basically, to immunize us against any charge that we might be being reckless or irresponsible.
Great. Not sure if you'll be able to speak to this question, but some of our previous webinars, presenters talked about using different online apps that aren't Zoom, such as like Jamulus, Jam, Kazam, Jacktrip, or some of those. Have any of you had experience with that? I think this question is also asking about the groups that we have had previously on our webinar. So maybe Linda would be able to speak to that part afterwards, but do either of you, are you familiar with those? And yeah, what's your experience?
So we a few of us experimented with Jamulus. Obviously, anything that would allow us to have synchronized singing over online would be wonderful. But quickly came to the conclusion that for our membership, it was just too complicated. The need to make sure you got the right drivers we got it working between a few of us that used Apple computers, but it didn't work with the PCs, and you had to eliminate Wi-Fi, you had to wear headphones. There was all sorts of technical constraints to make it work sufficiently, and it was for our membership some of whom are joining on phones or tablets, or and even anyone are struggling. It was just we looked at it, we experimented with it, and concluded it's not going to work for us.
Yeah, that was specifically mentioned in the question too, of getting users past the tougher tech requirements. Sounds like that can be a barrier for sure.
Yeah.
We never even looked at it. Zoom seems to be working for our purposes. We didn't look any further than that.
Great. Question for Steve. Can you talk more about how you do the 30-minute breakout room sessions?
Oh, yeah. So Zoom has breakout room feature, and when you set up the rooms, one of the choices is to assign people to the rooms randomly. So you can either assign them manually, you can allow them to choose their own rooms, or you can have Zoom just do a random allocation. And when you choose random allocation in the dialog box you use to start to create the rooms, not open them, but to create the rooms, there's a little counter of how many rooms, and as you change that counter, it tells you how many people it's going to put in each room. So we wiggle that till it looks till it's a number between 6 and 8, and then we just say create. And so that has worked well. So people get randomly assigned to small groups for 30 minutes, and that's enough time for everybody to sing at least one song. They can self-organize into taking turns, usually alphabetically or however they want, and it's a short enough time that if you don't like the people you've been assigned to, you're not with them very long. And then we do another. So we do that twice in an evening. So we do 30 minutes, and then we randomize for another 30 minutes to mix up who you're with. And of course, because it's really random, you may still have you may have one or two people in the same, in each of the two sessions. But it's something that people have told us they particularly like about our sessions, and they say that we're one of the few people that do that. And say it's very comfortable for people who aren't, who are a bit shy or who are beginners, who don't want to sing to the whole crowd, but it's a much more supportive environment for getting people to try anything. Go ahead, read a poem, whatever you want. And so yeah, we've been set. It requires. We actually have 2 texts and 2 MCs for each night we do this, and so there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make it look seamless to the people that are attending. But the feedback has been generally positive.
Wonderful.
Well, and one thing that you just said something about having text, and I didn't mention this. We have 3 people behind the scenes for our things. Even though we don't have breakout rooms, we have one person that's the starter, and they're the one that has the credentials. We have to keep that to a limited number of people knowing our passwords. And then we have one person who's the tech person, who's the assigning numbers and making sure people are muted. And then somebody that's just an MC, just a host. So we divide that up a little bit.
Yeah, that's very similar to how we're running tonight's web chat with staff from CDSS. This isn't a question per se, but someone mentioned another app that you can use to sing together is called Bucket List, or I think Song Bucket. And it's run by Jeff Keller out of the Boston Folk Song Society, where you can sort of build on each other singing. Bucket Brigade, thank you, is what that's called. So that's another app to write down if you want to give it a try.
Great, thanks.
Here's a question. On Zoom sessions, do people bring their own songbooks, or is it all that you're singing from the same songbook, or do you put lyrics up on the screen? Or what do you do in terms of songs?
For our group, everybody's bringing their own song. It's not a group singing in that way. And in fact, we have a number of people who write their own songs. So they're not songs that are going to be in a songbook anywhere. I am in another informal jam group that was meeting in a pub, and that was specifically a sing out songbook sing. And for that, people do bring, and we went to Zoom when we couldn't meet in person. And for that, people are bringing their own songbook and, call out page numbers and that sort of thing. But that's not what we do with the Golden Link sing-arounds. That answers the question, I think.
Yeah, same front. We don't have a songbook that we normally use. We have a a well-known repertoire because the same people keep coming over and over again, and many of the same songs we all learn. What some people do is especially if they're bringing a new song is paste the lyrics of the chorus into chat. So even though you can't hear people sing along, they can sing along with it. So and then I think I mentioned earlier, one of the downsides of Zoom is, at least for me, I've become very used to just reading my songs off the screen, and as opposed to memorizing the lyrics. And so I've become very lazy because you can do that and get away with it. So normally when we meet live, very few people use a music stand. The norm is to have memorized the words to your song. But we can get away without doing that over Zoom.
Our group would use music stands, not everybody, but some people would. I'm glad of that because I try to find a new song every week or challenge myself to learn something new, and it's hard to memorize all those every week.
Great. Well, I think that covers all the questions that have come in so far. But we have a few more minutes if anybody else has a thought that they want to share in the chat with me. Otherwise, I think we can go ahead and move on, Linda.
All right. So next slide, please, Nikki. Welcome to our next guest. Kimbi Hagen has many years of lots of experience in the public health world, as well as being an English country dancer and contra dancer and a dance organizer. So this is a wonderful combination of experiences and perspectives that she is bringing to our web chat this evening. So Kimbi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to come back. I really have enjoyed listening to these about the singing groups, because if you read my slide here, you'll notice that it says absolutely nothing about singing because in the town I grew up in, Marietta, Georgia, I think it was actually written into the town charter that every kid had to be in a school choir. But I was the kid who was asked to lip sync in the school choir and in the church choir. So I have a profound admiration for people who can sing, and I gravitate towards being the enthusiastic audience whenever I have that chance. So it's delightful to be here. I've been asked to talk this evening about the sort of the public health implications of what y'all are trying to do as song leader and organizers. So I was going to start for the minute with just doing a few slides about where we stand in the pandemic, and then I was going to answer questions that were submitted ahead of time by registrants for this program. And as new questions come up about from either what you've heard before from the previous two speakers, anything I'm saying now, just go ahead and put it in direct message, not to me, to our MC, and we'll take it from there. But let me share my screen for a minute. I'm going to, oh, am I supposed to wait for a minute? Oh, okay. I'm going to show before I get started, I'm going to answer one question that y'all had a moment ago about masks. I don't know whether or not y'all are using these N95s are, let's see, they have got that duckbill construction that creates extra space in front of your mouth, because it is absolutely true that it is not easy to sing in masks. I have a lot of friends, like I said, I gravitate towards listening to people who are singing, and they say that the single worst setup is if you wear just the double layered fabric, because it just moves in and out. It just kind of like feels like it's strangling your face. The next better option than that, if you don't have something like this, is to wear just a medical mask underneath the cloth mask, because that will, for reasons related to physics that I truthfully don't understand, makes it a lot easier to breathe in and out forcefully as you do when you're singing. And then the next step up from that would be like the one that I'm showing here on the screen, that is designed to be not only safe because it's an N95, but also to have, as I mentioned, the extra space in front of your where you can breathe. So I just thought I would do that. I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment, and then I'm going to go right back to showing the slides I had intended to. So give me just a moment to get here. Okay. This is a general question people have been asking lately. How bad is the pandemic right now? And here is the answer. Let's see. We don't actually know. And the reason we don't know, there are 4 reasons. There are 4 reasons for that. The first one is surveillance. You know, in the height of the early days of the pandemic in 2020, 2021, we had mass testing sites. And as those have closed, we no longer get the data that those sites presented. And you only find cases of COVID where you're looking for it. So as those sites have closed, our surveillance numbers have gone down all over North America. The second reason is reporting, which is very similar, because as people are taking home tests instead of going to mass testing sites, they're not reporting the results. I mean, I have asked several friends who've gone through COVID and had found out they did by testing positive at a home test, whether they had called their doctor or the health department to report the results. And so far, the answer has been 0. Nobody has. So I don't think that that's I'm an outlier in my experience of people not reporting. So there's a lot of people who have COVID, but it is not reflected in the official numbers. Third reason is politics. There's been a real push as the testing sites are closing down is to, instead of using test results to numbers, is to use hospitalizations numbers. That's great because those numbers are a lot more solid. You know, you count noses of people who are in the hospital with COVID, but that number is going to be delayed because people have to be really sick before they show up in the hospital. So the numbers that you see reflect actually a reality that started a couple of weeks before that. So the numbers, again, are probably low and not accurate. The fourth reason, as Mark Twain is highly credited with saying, is there are 3 kinds of lies, damned lies, and statistics. And this is the reason why that Mark Twain was talking, is that on February the 25th, 2022, this map was on the CDC website. And this is just showing on this site, the United States, Canada does not appear, but on this map, roughly 90% of all the counties in the US were listed as having high and sustained community transmission rates. On that same day, on February 25th, 2022, that map disappeared and this one was put in its place. Through the miracle of time turning, this map now showed what apparently had happened the previous day on February 24th, when only 30% of the counties were showing high transmission. What happened? How what changed? Well, what changed were the rules about how you count transmission. They moved the goalposts, they raised the bar, whatever sports metaphor you want to use, but it's now about 20 times harder, 20 times more difficult to have your county declared to have a medium or a high or even a low transmission rate. So the number of people with COVID did not change overnight, but the maps did. And it's those maps that are driving the government rules that you have all been quoting for use in your things. People talk about the numbers going down. They're not really going down, just the reported ones. So this is a quick factoid about the CDC. This is an aside. Not a lot of people know this, but they've actually changed their name 4 times since they first came into being in 1946 as the Communicable Disease Center. And as my friend Pam Ebsen suggested, in 2022, they probably need to change it one more time. Okay, so given the fact that the numbers are squishy, where do we stand? Globally, over 500 million people have confirmed cases. Again, that number is, I guarantee you, low. If you look specifically at the Americas, we've got 153 million cases so far, of which 30% are collectively between the United States and Canada. The others are in the rest of the Americas. So that's where we are, but that was history. The question is, is the pandemic over now, though, isn't it? We're having mask rules are dropping, vaccine passport rules are dropping. How bad is it now? Well, this is just the Americas. This is not the globe. This is from World Health Organization. And what I want you to notice is that at the time that masking and vaccines, passports started to drop away, the numbers started to skyrocket. It's not a good idea yet to be holding events without asking people to wear masks, without asking people to have to be vaccinated and to be boosted, particularly as our singing groups through CDSS do tend to skew towards older people. Now, this within the last couple of months, there's been a tipping point, and the people who are hospitalized and are dying from COVID are no longer principally the people who weren't vaccinated. Now we're actually seeing it tip the other way to a slight majority of people who are hospitalized and dying who are in fact vaccinated and boosted. So it's out there. This is what a pandemic curve looks like. So I'm going to show you where we are right now, but it just starts with like where only animals get it. And then animal jumps across species into humans. And then you have the sustained period where it starts passing from people to people. Then you get to the part where we've been living in for the last 2 years, the pandemic. And then eventually you get to the part where it begins to taper off, although there's always a chance it could come back when a new variant shows up. And then this Edenic world we are hopefully to be living in sooner or later, called post-pandemic. Right now, according to Tony Fauci, whom I trust scientifically, we're right there. We are at the last edge of the pandemic phase. We are not yet at post-peak, even though we would like to think we are. We are getting there, but we're not there yet. So how are we going to know when we're post-pandemic? There are a lot of definitions because we're all making this up as we go along, but this is the one that works for me. And that would be that not that when we have 0 COVID deaths, but when we don't have any more COVID deaths than we would normally see in a year when we had like a bad flu outbreak. Because people do die from respiratory infections. And if we were to have just the same or fewer COVID deaths as we would in a standard flu year, then we could perhaps say that we've now reached sort of a, where COVID is like background noise, like we're used to with respiratory diseases. So from a practical standpoint, what that means is that we should have less than 1 COVID death per 2 million people in a population per day. How does that play out in the United States and Canada? If you take that formula and you put it up against the population of the United States, the population of Canada, if we had 165 COVID deaths a day in the US and 19 COVID deaths a day in Canada, we could say by this definition, and this was sustained, not just, okay, it was between bumps from the different cycles of the pandemic. But if this was sustained, we could say we've done it. We're in post-pandemic phase. So where are we right this minute? As of yesterday, the United States had about twice as many target deaths, and Canada had 2.5 times as many target deaths per day from COVID. So we're not there yet. We are not in the post-pandemic phase. I'm going to stop sharing in a minute. Let's see, did I stop sharing? Have I can't actually see. Would somebody put their thumb up if I stop sharing my screen? Cool, great, okay, thank you. That was your primer. I'm going to now go to the questions that y'all submitted ahead of time. The first one is, is the pandemic over? I covered that. I want to mention, because this matters, is people generally think the pandemic is over. They thought the pandemic was over the day they stopped requiring masks on airplanes. Just the general public says that was the day it ended. I'd like to point out that the federal judge in Florida in the United States, who single-handedly overturned the CDC's law-abiding mandate requiring masks on that, was using really bad public health interpretation. Her interpretation was based on the word sanitary that appears in the law, saying that the CDC has jurisdiction over sanitary issues related to the public health. Here's the deal. In 1946, when the CDC's charter began, the word sanitary meant something different than it does now. Back then, sanitary referred to health and wellness. People in the 1940s took sanitary precautions in the form of masks to prevent tuberculosis. That's what they call them, sanitary precautions. If you got tuberculosis anyway in the 1940s, you were sent to a sanitarium. So sanitary meant those actions that prevent and treat health and wellness. In the modern era, now in 2022, we've really narrowed our accepted definition of sanitary to mean clean. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but we used to do a lot of traveling when I was growing up, and we would go to these motels on the side of the road, and they would have a little strip of paper over the toilet seat. This has been sanitized for your protection. So the idea is that sanitary means a physical action to clean something. And the judge says wearing masks on airplanes, unless you've removed it to clean up a spill on your tray, is not sanitizing anything. So the CDC has no jurisdiction over masks because it's nothing to do with sanitation. It's a complete misreading because the definition changed over time. So that's it. So please do not place too much of your own personal decisions about your groups about singing based on what the regulations are, because the regulations are increasingly coming out of data that is fuzzier and fuzzier and are becoming out of legal decisions that are really off base and are misinterpretations for it. Question was, what percentage of people in the United States have had COVID? 6 out of every 10 people in our country in the United States have been infected with COVID to date. 6 out of every 10. A lot of them were completely asymptomatic or very, very mildly symptomatic, only discovered it when they were tested for some purpose. But in the 3 days or so before they began to show any symptoms, spread it at will. If they weren't walking around wearing a mask, being very careful, which in today's reality with mask mandates falling down, they probably are walking around without masks on. How many people in the United States have died from COVID? Was the next question asks. 991,000, closing in on 1 million to date. If at the current rate, if the rate that we're having right now were to stay steady, we'll hit 1 million around Memorial Day weekend, which would be like totally ironic. 1 million deaths from COVID, just to put it in perspective, would equal all of the US and Canadian soldiers who died during World War II, and it would equal 17 Vietnams. It's a lot of people. How far do sung aerosols travel? Okay, now that's going to depend on the force that you are projecting. The more force behind it, this is assuming you're not masked, the farther that they're going to travel. Aerosols, when you are speaking, can go 20 to 30 feet. If you are singing with any great gusto, which of course you guys do, they're going to go farther. And because they're aerosols, not droplets. Droplets, aerosols, not the same thing. Droplets are like what you can see when you sneeze on the counter. Aerosols are invisible. They just kind of hang in the air. And they can hang in the air for a really long time, probably longer than your singing session is on a given night. Next question. Does social distancing still apply for singing indoors if all are vaxxed? Yes, it does. Because people who are vaxxed and boosted can still have COVID. They're the ones that as I said, that it's tipping more towards people being hospitalized who are vaxxed. So just because you're vaxxed doesn't mean that you shouldn't be thinking with concern and compassion for the rest of the people in your group, thinking, how can I protect them if I am not completely certain I am free of the virus? Well, one of the ways you can protect them is for you all to socially distance from each other, vaccines or not. Next question, is singing considered more risky than chatting or Morris dancing, or about the same? Well, okay, the least risky is going to be chatting. You know, you're talking, your aerosols are going 20 to 30 feet, but you can chat from a distance. It's possible to do that. Unlike Morris dancing, which is the most risky, because Morris dancing is a very vigorous activity that many moves take you very close to the person, you know, other people in the set. So here you are breathing hard with people so that's going to be riskier than just chatting, because you can't socially distance while you're Morris dancing, or not easily. Singing's going to fall in the middle. It's going to be, because it's going to be more, you're ejecting aerosols more forcefully than chatting, but you can be socially distanced. So it's not all the same. And that's really, so from least to most is going to be chatting, singing, Morris dancing, or I should have gone the other way. Chatting, singing, Morris dancing, reach high. Question on update on current theory of how COVID is spread. Is it still droplets? It is still droplets, and it's aerosols, as I was saying. It's both of those. Droplets usually land about, depending on how hard you cough, about 6 feet away, but they're visible. You can see them, you can avoid them. Aerosols are harder because they hang in the air. You can walk through them. You can reduce your risk, of course, by wearing a mask, which leads into the next question is, like, if you're the only person in the room with a mask, can you be safe? Well, you're not going to be safe, but you're going to be safer. You've heard by now that the saying is, my mask protects you, your mask protects me. So the true safety is when other people are masked, but you are protecting yourself to an extent, to a large extent, when you are masked. So even if it's a mask optional event, you can increase your protection by being masked. There is a friend of mine here in Atlanta, vaccinated, boosted, and masked, is dealing with really severe COVID as we speak, that she has no idea where she got it. But at some point, she was in a room with someone. She walked through somebody's aerosols, and they were not masked because they were able to eject that. So, and I am guessing that person had no idea that they were infectious. But vaccinated, boosted, it's still a big deal. So wear a mask, even if others aren't. A rapid test less accurate. The rapid tests are less accurate with Omicron. Are there any other options? Well, you remember the two options are rapid tests, like you can have at your house in your kitchen, and then PCR tests, which you usually do by spitting into a tube instead of sticking a stick up your nose. The problem with the PCR tests is that they can be false positive. Not that they show people are infected when they're not, but they can still test positive after you've stopped being infectious. So if you take a PCR and you are in fact past the infectious stage, you might still show up positive on a PCR test. So the rapid test, which suffers from a false negative, the opposite problem is false negative, is that people can have, and I know of one person who had COVID who tested positive on a PCR and tested negative on a rapid test. They can show up negative when they are. So the 1-2 punch is really the best, is that if you suspect that you have COVID, either because you've had an exposure to it or you start to feel bad, you could take a rapid test, wait 3 to 4 days after your exposure, because it will definitely be a false negative up until then. And then if you have any question in your mind, go get a PCR. Go get a PCR. Let's see. How will we know, these are 2 questions left. How will we know when the time is right to start up again if we don't want to start and stop? From what I've said, there is the turning on of the COVID pandemic was like a light switch. There was a time in March 2020 when CDSS just shut us all down because they were smarter than we were. They knew it was time to call a halt to singing, dancing, and music things. It was a light switch. The turning off of the pandemic is going to be more like a dimmer bulb. It's going to come up slowly. It may go back down again. It may go back up again. And as song organizers, your job is going to be really hard. It's going to be trying to convince people while we're not completely dark again on the pandemic, while that dimmer bulb is still showing some light, is to convince people to stay safe. It isn't going to be easy, because probably if you truly don't want to start your song group up again until we are in the post-pandemic stage, you're going to need to wait probably until the number of deaths per day is roughly equal to what we experienced with influenza, with the flu. And that's going to be a while. I don't have a crystal ball that works well, but I'm pretty sure we haven't seen the last of the variants. I mean, we're up through Omicron. Now they're just giving them bizarre numbers. I just refer to the current one as son of Omicron, but there's going to be more. There's going to be more. So I don't know. You're going to need to decide. I would just urge you not to wait until we are completely post-pandemic. Don't wait until we're all the way there. The singing is too important as a community building activity. It brings so much joy into people's lives, particularly people like me who can't carry a tune in a bucket. We need you. So I would really urge you to listen to the experience of the people who presented before and think your way around how you can do this in a safe manner. And if you have to stop and start again. And if you have to stop a second time, so stop a second time and then start again. Last question is, as organizers, how can we give people the comfort and reliability that they need and associate with our singing events at a time when things are so uncertain in the world? Well, the first thing I'd say is it's because the things are so uncertain in the world is why we need your singing events. This is the exact moment for them. The last time I gave a web chat for CDSS, I came up with an acronym on the fly, which I love because it's very music oriented. It's VAMP, V-A-M-P, VAMP. Vaccines, air movement, masks, and personal responsibility. If you're, as an organizer, can be strong and ask people, even when vaccine passports fall by the wayside, ask people to be vaccinated, show their card. You can ask people to wear masks, give different kinds of try, do what Steve was saying, put a line way over there on the other side of the football field where they can stand unmasked behind that. There's workarounds for this, but masks are going to continue to be important. Air movement, the best way to deal with aerosols is to make them go away. Air movement. And then personal responsibility. And that is, we all recognize that We owe a debt of humanity and of civility to our friends, to our neighbors, to strangers, and don't try to game the system. Just if you don't feel well, stay home. Stay home. If you feel like you did that, go ahead and call in. It sounds like you've all are putting together contact tracing procedures. Make use of that. Ask people to show some personal responsibility for that. So VAMP. Beyond that, I mean, when I got this question, I started calling around to my friends who do a lot of singing. They said that when you are doing a live event, if you're in mass, a really good thing to do, this is not my idea, this is their suggestion, is to try to stand in a circle and deliberately make eye contact with the person across the circle from you, rather than just singing into the middle distance. Make contact by eye with somebody so that you are having a connection. They also suggested that you do rounds, because when you're doing a round, you're touching somebody else's song. Your singing is touching their singing. And that kind of creates this sort of oral sense of community that will promote closeness. And the third suggestion that they had, and this is where I'll end so that we can take any questions if any have come up, is they said song choice. They said, this might be the time of our lives where we want to embrace more the onward Christian soldiers than the Amazing Grace. we want songs that will make you tap your feet, bring you joy, more than the songs. Although, of course, the sadder, smoother, silkier songs have gorgeous opportunities for harmony, but this might be a time when we really want to deliberately use our voices to bring joy. So those are the three suggestions when I asked around after receiving that question. That's it. Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me. I love this.
Thank you so much, Kimbi. So much great stuff to be taking home with us. So Sarah, I think we have just about 5 minutes left for questions for Q&A.
Great. Yeah, a few questions have come in. Do you know about COVID surveillance in the sewer system of wastewater, in particular, if you happen to know about New York State, but just in general as well?
Yeah, well, as it turns out, one of my colleagues at work at School of Public Health does that. Her safe water is her field expertise. Their wastewater surveillance is excellent because you can pick up COVID in wastewater. And if you understand the math, which I don't, you can actually make pretty good predictions about how many people in your community might be infected with it. The trouble is that it requires training that is not present in all the communities. So wastewater surveillance is not widespread. And I don't know, I would think it would be highly available in New York City, big city, lots of schools of public health. But I suggest you Google it, wastewater surveillance, New York, see what pops up.
Great. This person knows families that have had COVID twice with different mutations. Do you know if they're being counted twice in the numbers?
Yeah, that's an intriguing question. I don't know whether they'd be counted twice. My guess is they would be, that they're counting cases, not people. So if you show up twice, they're going to put you down twice, particularly if they are able to document that you've got a different mutation, because they also want to know how many cases of Delta did we have? How many cases of Omicron have we got? That sort of thing. So probably, but that's just me guessing, tell you the truth.
We actually had two different versions of this next question, which is how does having a beard affect your mask fit? So the edge seal for your N95s.
Yeah, it's if my husband were here, he could show you how much I love guys in beards. So it is an issue that we deal with in our own household. That is an example of where you might want to just do some shopping, because there are lots of different masks out there in the market and they fit differently. So you want a mask that's going to come under your chin, and you want a mask that's going to be able to where the air is not leaking in and out of it.
if somebody is wearing a mask with a beard and it's not perfectly sealed, do you have a sense of like how much that degrades the protection?
Well, it's what I have. This is one of the things we do with my husband, is that when he's got his mask on with his beard, is that I have him put his hands right here, and he breathes out really hard to see if he can feel the air. You know, and if he can feel the air, then we have to keep kind of messing with it. If he can't feel the air, we're like, okay, it's obviously not 100% because the beard is creating a space, but it's pretty darn close to 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is related to that map you showed with the new green, yellow, and reds. How would you say, are those adequate for making decisions about dancing or singing? So can we sing at the green, but not a red? What's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that the CDC was under astonishing political pressure to change the way that the numbers were reported in terms of what was considered low, medium, and high. That, you know, it's Congress provides the money that keeps the CDC doors open. They have to follow what Congress says. But other than saying that if I'm in an area that shows high, shows medium, shows low, that tells me something relative to other parts of the country, but it does not tell me the truth about how much COVID I've got in my community. That, you know, you saw the two maps. The one that was marked February 24th showed, you know, like 20 times less. 30% of the counties had high transmission versus 90%. And then, you know, one on February 25th, we had that red map. So I don't really think it was just interesting the way that they kind of like rolled back time at the same time that they changed the definition. So use it as to show you like this area of the country seems to be showing up with an increase in numbers, recognizing that the numbers themselves are no longer being as adequately collected. Mm-hmm. It's very fuzzy. I wish I could say differently, but it's just true for the reasons that I laid out before. We can no longer really trust. All we can know for sure is that whatever we're reporting is low. It's probably a lot higher than what is being reported.
So would you say then, rather than trusting or using the like low, medium, high, look at the actual number itself and sort of make a determination based on your level, comfort level with that transmission level? You can, there's a whole bunch of places where which you can find by Googling, that will show the COVID numbers in your province, your state, your city, your county, depending on how finely tuned the different websites are. You can look at those numbers, and as long as I'm just going to keep drumming this in until it is like, you know, etched into your song organizer DNA. As long as you look at those numbers and go, okay, that's the bottom number that it could possibly be. The actual number is higher than what I'm looking at by some undefined measure. So, yeah. Okay. But I think actual numbers is better because those maps now, bless their hearts, I love that. My office is across a small 2-lane road from the CDC, and I can feel the desperation emanating from the building on a daily basis. I feel so bad for the people who work at the CDC. This is not their fault. But the maps they put out, I don't think you can really make decisions based on them anymore.
Okay, Sarah, I think we'll wrap it up there.
Great. Any other questions that we didn't get to, we'll send to Kimbi after for answers.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I always talk too much.
Kimbi, everything that you have shared with us is important for us to know. So we will wrap it up by sending you home with some resources. There we go. Next slide. So I'm just going to run through these very quickly. These are online programs that are coming up, and I wanted you to especially know about the Song Organizers Intensive that's happening at Pinewoods this summer for 1 week. This is a chance to meet with Nicole Singer and a group of organizers and talk for throughout the week about ways that you can support each other with your song groups. Next slide. Another glimpse of intensives and courses that are happening at our camps. Visit camp.cdss.org for more information. Next. On our website, we have the CDSS resource portal, and we have specifically a COVID section. And you can find resources for organizers there. We also have an events calendar, and we have a fairly new resource where you can click on entries from about 50 different groups to see their firsthand experiences with reopening their events. Next. Here's a list of more resources. The resource portal that I just mentioned, Shared Weight, is a listserv for organizers. We have a grants program if you are needing funding for a specific event or whatever. Web chat series, of course. Our CDSS newsletter often includes articles for organizers, and one-on-one support from staff members. By the way, there has been a web chat that was specifically about singing and playing music in real time. And so if you check that, link there, cdss.org/web chats, you can find information about that web chat and all the others that we've had. Also, here's a mention of our option to become a CDSS affiliate and a link there for more information. Next slide. So these are many ways that we have been putting resources together to offer to organizers, and here's a way that you could be supporting us. These web chats have been happening for 4 years now, and we always choose the topics based on the feedback that we receive from web chat participants. These have been free of charge for this entire time, and the only way that this has been possible is by membership and donations. So here's a link for information to become a member or make a donation. Any amount would be very helpful, and so this is a way that you could help us keep these web chats going. Next slide. So in the next day or so, you'll be receiving a survey, and we would love to have your input. This is a chance for you to make a request for future web chat topics. Also, if you have a question that was not answered during this web chat, you can enter your question there, and we'll find answers for you. So stay tuned. We'll be sending out announcements about the next web chat in a few weeks. And we are always happy to hear from you with your questions and comments and requests. Resources at cdss.org is a way to reach me. And please remember that we are here for any way we can learn about that will be for creating new resources for you. Next slide. So we've come to the end of our time together. Thanks again for joining us. We're really glad to see each of you, and we hope that you've been able to glean some ideas and connections and fresh energy to bring back to your group. So we'll end in just a minute or two. And for those of you who would like to hang around and socialize for a bit more, we're going to see, we're going to do an experiment and try that out. Thanks again to Steve and Janice and Kimbi for all the time that you spent getting ready for this web chat. We really appreciate all your experiences and perspectives. And I'm sure if all the people on this web chat were able to, they would be giving you big hugs. All right. So goodbye to you all, except for those who want to stick around.